Imagine that, point of sale. So why don't we go ahead and segue in that there, Matt?
All right, let's go for it. So again, from RSA, more great work. A team of 2 researchers found out, did another survey of the state of POS. They mentioned one vendor in particular. I wasn't able to dig up their name, and we probably shouldn't mention it on the air anyway, but this vendor was using the same admin password for 9 years, and it's depending on which keyboard you're using on the device, it's Z66816 or 166816, which is, either one is not a very good password.
No.
And especially if it's not been changed for that long, eventually that's going to leak. So it's something that's a long-standing, I'd call it a vulnerability.
Now, is this something the end users had the opportunity to change?
I'm not sure. I mean, I would hope that most users would. My understanding is that most people who are using point-of-sale systems are not directly managing them themselves. They're contracting a third-party IT staff to set them up. And depending on what sort of diligence that staff is doing, they may just be saying, you've got a working POS system, you're good to go, or they may actually be setting up and saying, all right, for this customer we're using this password, for this customer we're using a separate one. That would be the right way to do it. So it's hard to say with any certainty.
So when you're contracting with a POS vendor, you want to ask them what the acronym really stands for.
You do.
Okay.
These days, POS terminals are still primarily Windows machines with a few peripherals attached, usually with USB or sometimes even serial for certain peripherals. So, I mean, the basic desktop or server security rules should be applying in this space. It seems that in a lot of cases it's not. I mean, for example, you wouldn't use your back-end server to play, say, Call of Duty or maybe Guitar Hero, but the researchers did find evidence that people were using, in a particular case, the back of house PCs for these purposes.
Imagine that.
And the funny part is, one of those machines was already compromised, and the keylogger had been picking up the keystrokes for Guitar Hero. So you could see them, people tapping the keys, trying to play the game. In other cases, they were used for more mundane, but still questionable purposes, internet browsing, torrents, looking at porn, all sorts of things you wouldn't want, what I essentially believe is critical infrastructure, to be allowed to do.
Yeah.
So I think we were saying earlier that this is a space where it has a lot of catching up to do in terms of becoming what we would expect enterprise hardware infrastructure to be like. People should be very much aware of what their point of sale system is doing at the terminal. If it may be a pin pad or a complete POS system or a back-end server. I mean, these things all need to be protected because credit card information is being stored there.
So, I guess along these lines, perhaps one of the things to recommend folks do when they go out to contract this thing is that even before they go out to look at candidates for providing a service, to kind of write down what your expectations are from a security standpoint. What are your password management practices? Things that you would you reflect on yourself and say, these are the kinds of things that I expect my provider to do. And at the very least, ask them those questions. If not, make that a binding part of the contract agreement. So there's at least some opportunity that if you run into a problem, you have some opportunity to seek some retribution around it. Otherwise, you're really kind of, it's whatever they give you, right?
Yeah, I feel like there should be a checklist, something you can hand out to small to medium-sized businesses that use these devices and rely on someone else to do the IT side.
Well, in fact, I think that's what the PCI requirements are intended to do. But I think this is one of these difficult balances, is how do you provide the opportunity for innovation or flexibility, cost effectiveness, at the same time as being very specific about the requirements. It's inherently a balance that you have to come down to. And I think there are certainly other aspects of this, and I'm certainly not a PCI expert, but to some extent, the retailer becomes liable for fraudulent activities. And so if they contract to a third-party organization, it's still potentially the retailer that's liable. So that ultimately puts it on the retailer to make sure that they're doing the right things. So your point is well taken. All this comes down to really some basic fundamental security practices, although I never have read a NIST standard that mentions anything about not playing Guitar Hero.
We have to spell it out for you? No Call of Duty 1, no Call of Duty 2, no Call of Duty World at War. No,
yeah, I can think of worse security risks than that, but it is certainly one of those things that you want to try to have some controls around. So taking, that was actually kind of a depressing story, I have to say.
Yeah.
I mean, it got really worse than I even expected myself, but lots of opportunities for improvement.